Our gospel reading tonight is from the Gospel according to John, beginning at chapter 12, verse 1, and ending with verse 8. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at table with him. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." This is the word of the Lord. You have to understand, every day there was a party. Every day. Beginning with the day her brother had done what no one does. Every day, beginning with the day that he had stumbled, bound in strips of cloth out of a tomb. No, he had not been the pallbearer. He had been the dead man at that funeral. Now that Lazarus was alive again, every day there was a party. The house was ever swarming with guests, relatives, friends. The oldest living uncle, carried by his equally ancient friends from a town miles away, all there to celebrate, to drink wine, to break bread. To drink the wine, though, which flowed as if from a miraculous, bottomless source. The house was filled with their laughter and their songs, with the aromas of the food that were brought in and prepared. It was like a wedding. Lazarus was alive again. He had done what no one had done. Now, many, it is true, came for other reasons. There were the hired mourners, somewhat put out that their paying gig had come to an abrupt and premature halt. They came to make certain that the family of Lazarus, the dead man, was not trying simply to get out of an expensive contract. And there were the religious authorities, who had a certain gift of entering a room and draining it of all life, noise, and joy. They looked Lazarus over as if he were a horse for sale. One of them made him open his mouth to show them his teeth. After they left, he'd shown his teeth for hours, grinning, laughing, singing, and eating. Every day, there was a party. And finally, on the seventh day of celebrating, Jesus joined them. She had been waiting for him to come. She had known it was only a matter of time. Of course he would stop by on his way to Jerusalem for the Passover. And when he did, Mary would have a gift for him. The tenor of a party when Jesus was there was unlike the other parties. That's because those who didn't know him came into his presence with a kind of shyness or wariness. He was known. He had preached in the temple and on the streets. He had performed astonishing signs and miracles. He was known as a personage of importance, perhaps a prophet, a religious leader in his own slightly off-center right. The parties would thus begin on a more somber note. That is until Jesus spoke. Then something would happen. Something would happen to those around him. They would understand almost immediately that with him they were in the presence of someone unlike, anyone they had ever encountered before. They would know instinctively, intuitively, that in him they were in the presence of pure love. That is what Mary wanted to convey to him. Pure love, pure gratitude. She wanted to say, I see you. I understand what it is you bring to us. And so that night, at the end of the meal, as her sister Martha poured wine from a jug into cups that were nearly empty, and as her brother Lazarus leaned against Jesus, listening intently, his newborn eyes shining, Mary slipped from the room. She went to the place where she and her sister slept, and from a high shelf she took a jar of alabaster that held a foolishly large quantity of oil of spikenard, the most expensive, the most fragrant, the most luxurious ointment she could buy. She had spent a small fortune on it. She did not care. She would have spent 1,000 large fortunes on it if she could. She carried the jar into the great room, filled with their guests, satisfied and smiling from the delicious dinner and the sweet company. Her siblings both looked up at the same moment. And if they were surprised, neither of them betrayed it. For her part, Mary only had eyes for Jesus. He too was looking at her, but with another expression on his face, one that she only understood later. She knelt in front of him. She took his feet in her hands. And then she opened the jar, pouring the ointment out on his feet. It was lavish. It was frankly wasteful. It was irrational. It was love. Immediately, the fragrance rose like the incense in the evening psalm, like the prayers of pilgrims rise up to heaven. The fragrance rose and it danced around the room, and everyone there inhaled it and sighed at its beauty. And every eye was on Jesus, watching his reaction. He simply looked at Mary. She took a long time. She rubbed the ointment into his feet, feet that had crossed the Holy Land so many times on his journeys. Nazareth to Bethany, Bethany to Jerusalem, back to Bethany, and then back to Galilee. Countless miles his feet had walked. He had the feet of a worker or a farmer, strong and calloused, tendons showing taut through his brown skin. She massaged the fragrant nard into his feet as tenderly and lovingly as if he were a baby. Then she lowered her head and unpinned a great length of thick black hair. And it cascaded down onto his feet. And then she wiped his feet with her hair. No one knew why, but Martha was weeping. Lazarus was weeping too. Jesus' eyes sparkled in the lamplight, but no tears brimmed over. The mood of the room was thoughtful, perhaps somewhat confused. Mary was not confused. She knew what she was doing. Mary knew the meaning of her actions. It was love, pure gratitude. And she understood later, only a few short days later, it was the beginning of a wrenching goodbye.